Conference Championship weekend. A week that you may have been waiting for all year long. Or maybe a week that you have been dreading. Because once we get to this point in the season, it is a sign that the season is coming to a close. And I think with the games on Saturday, with the Army-Navy game next week, with the bowl games and the semifinals for the playoff and the championship game, I think all of that adds up to maybe 55 games left in the college football season, which the season has gone by really fast. It feels like just last week I was predicting week 1, and how excited that not only I was for the season, but all of you guys as well, because this was going to be one of the most exciting years in college football in a long time, if not ever, because it felt like everything was going back to normal after the 2020 season, where it was limited to no fan attendance, to every stadium getting filled back to 100% capacity again. And it was something to be excited about, and it is coming to an end. But before I get to my conference championship weekend predictions, a couple things. One, I am hosting a Bowl Mania group this season, and I will put the link to the group in the comment section down below, and I will pin it. So feel free to join my Bowl Mania group. I'm hoping that I get at least maybe 20 to 30 people in this group, because the more people that are in it, the more excited that I get, because the more people that compete, the more fun that it is. So I'm hoping that you all join. Second, I want to quickly discuss the big news from yesterday. Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma to go to USC. And right off the bat, this is a major downgrade for him, because he is leaving Oklahoma, a program that has championship aspirations every season, aspirations for the college football playoff, and he is leaving all of that to go to USC, a program that hasn't been relevant in nearly a decade, if not longer than that. And he left Oklahoma at the right time, because he saw an opportunity at USC to get out of one situation and one situation only, to get out of the SEC conference. Because with Oklahoma going to the SEC in a couple of years, he's afraid of the SEC. And he saw this as an opportunity. He abandoned the program when he could, because let's just face it, Oklahoma has been struggling all season long. And they even struggled at the beginning of last year as well. I actually think Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma have lost more games just in the last 2 seasons than Oklahoma has lost in all the other years combined under Lincoln Riley. At least that's what it feels like, with how consistent a program like Oklahoma is. And it's evident he's afraid of the SEC, because there were even rumors that he was interested in LSU. I feel like if he wasn't afraid of the SEC, then he would have at least gone to LSU. At least in my opinion, because honestly, I feel like if he wants to win a national championship, LSU would be the better option. USC, it's just a program that maybe you'll have maybe 1 to 2 complete outlier strong seasons, those strong 10, 11 win seasons, and then pretty average, mediocre in all the other years. But I will say this, if Lincoln Riley can't coach USC to a Pac-12 championship, within 3 seasons, yeah, I'm giving him 3 seasons, then I think it's going to be evident that he is one of, if not the most overrated coach in all of college football. And that he just benefited from being at a program like Oklahoma this entire time. But I also do want to mention that Oklahoma has hired Brent Venables, the Clemson defensive coordinator. And I will say I am a bit surprised by this hire. Not because Brent Venables is not a bad option. He's a great option. But I thought Brent Venables was waiting. I thought he was the heir to the throne to Dabo Swinney. I assumed that he was going to be Dabo Swinney's successor when Dabo Swinney goes to Alabama when Nick Saban retires. Because, yes, that is going to happen. But with Nick Saban signing that 8-year extension for Alabama, Brent Venables didn't want to wait 8 more years to become a head coach. So he jumped at the opportunity to take the Oklahoma job. And I think that is great for Oklahoma and Brent Venables. It's, in my opinion, the perfect hire, considering Oklahoma is going into the SEC conference. And Oklahoma has not been a team that has been known for their defense. Their defense has been improving throughout the last couple of years. But Brent Venables is going to make the Oklahoma defense much better, especially when they go to the SEC conference. And the last thing before I get to my conference championship weekend predictions, a new top 10. No surprise at number 1, Georgia, moving all the way to 2nd, Michigan, number 3, Alabama, number 4, Cincinnati, all the way in the top 5, Oklahoma State, number 6, Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been playing much better football since their loss to Cincinnati, and if absolute chaos took place on Saturday, the Irish might be one of those 4 teams in the playoff. Number 7, Baylor. They play Oklahoma State this Saturday for the Big 12 Championship, and the winner of the Big 12 title game, I think, will have a big case to be one of those 4 teams in the playoff. Number 8, Ohio State. They will need the absolute chaos to ensue this weekend for them to even have a consideration at a playoff spot, but I think they're done. Number 9, Ole Miss, and running out the top 10, Michigan State. So it will be exciting to see how Saturday plays out. If we get the absolute chaos this week, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the committee will grant Ohio State a spot in the 4-team playoff. You just never know. Because we are guaranteed to have Georgia or Alabama lose. We're guaranteed to have Oklahoma State or Baylor lose. I mean, Cincinnati, they might lose. Michigan, they might lose. Any given Saturday, we've had, in my opinion, the most chaotic season in college football since 2007. So you just never know. We won't find out until Saturday, but at this time next week, we will find out who will be the 4 teams in the college football playoff. And without further ado, let's get to the Conference Championship Weekend predictions. Kicking things off with the Sun Belt Championship, Appalachian State and Louisiana. And this is a rematch from Week 7, where Louisiana absolutely dominated 41-13 for Appalachian State. Chase Bryce had his worst game of the year that night, 133 yards and 2 interceptions. And Louisiana, they pounded the rock in that game, 246 rushing yards in that game. And neither of these teams have lost since that game. In fact, Louisiana, ever since their opening loss to Texas in Week 1, 11 straight wins. And I believe overall, I think they have won 33 out of their last 37 games, which I don't care what program that is. I don't care what program you are or what conference you're in. That is really hard to do, to win 33 games out of 37. And Billy Napier, he is a disciplined coach. He always has his team disciplined, and that is a big reason why Florida hired him. And I think we could be in for a low-scoring game because both of these teams, they don't give up a lot of points. In fact, both of these defenses are only allowing an average of about 18 to 19 points per game. But I think this game is going to be a lot closer than what it was in Week 7. Are there any distractions within the Louisiana program, knowing that Billy Napier is about to be the head coach for Florida? I think that Louisiana, they're going to play hard for Coach Napier, send him out on a positive before he heads on to Florida. And I think Louisiana, they win this game, but I think it's much closer than what it was in Week 7. It won't be 41-13. I think it's going to be Louisiana 31, App State 21. Moving on to Houston and Cincinnati in the American Athletic Conference Championship game. For the Bearcats, perhaps win and you're in the college football playoff. They would be the first group of 5 team to ever make the college football playoff, but they got to get past Houston before they are even in the discussion. And Cincinnati, this will be their toughest opponent since Notre Dame. And I know I said that when they played SMU a couple weeks ago, and they ended up dominating SMU from start to finish. However, Cincinnati has not played a defense like Houston all season long, because Houston is 19th in scoring defense, only giving them an average of 19.8 points per game. They are 6th overall in total defense, including being 4th in third down defense. So this Houston defense doesn't allow a lot of third down conversions. Also, Houston, they're in the top 10 in scoring offense, so they could perhaps keep pace with Cincinnati, where they average 38.8 points per game. Cincinnati, they're 8th in scoring offense, scoring an average of 39.1 points per game. However, the bad news for Houston, you have a problem. Cincinnati has not allowed more than 28 points in a game all season. And I think the magic number for Houston to pull off this upset would be about 31-35. Cincinnati, they are 3rd in scoring defense, only giving up an average of 15.75 points per game. And they are 8th in total defense. So I see this game going one of two ways. Either we're going to see a shootout, and Houston is going to have Cincinnati on the ropes, or we're going to see a complete defensive shootout, where the defenses will show out all game long, and it's going to be a very low-scoring game. But I think a big difference in this game might be Houston with the time of possession, because they are 8th in the country in time of possession. So I think if Houston can dictate the pace of the game by controlling the football, and they've got a really good shot of pulling off the upset. But I think Cincinnati, they pull off the win, but I don't know if it's going to be good enough for the College Football Playoff Committee to grant them access to a spot in the College Football Playoff. I think the Bearcats win, but I think they only win by a score of 28-24. Moving on to Oregon and Utah in the Pac12 Championship. A spot in the Rose Bowl on the line in this matchup. Now, this is a rematch from Week 12 where Utah dominated 38-7. So how will Oregon come out in this game, knowing that this is the same team that absolutely beat you down and ended your season well, ended your chance of going to the college football playoff just 2 weeks ago. How will they come out to begin the game? I would imagine that Mario Cristobal is going to have the Ducks come out with fiery intensity. However, Oregon, I think a big reason why I think Utah is going to win this game again and beat Oregon for a second time. Oregon is 120th in third down defense. And Utah, they don't put themselves in long yardage situations because they are 8th in the country in fewest penalties. And they have the 13th best rushing offense in all of college football. And let's also not forget about Utah's defense. They held Travis Dye to just 29 rushing yards in that Week 12 game. As going into it, Travis Dye was a big difference maker for the Ducks and why they had been so successful after their loss to Stanford. So all Utah, in my opinion, has to do is contain Travis Dye again, and Utah will once again dominate. But I still think Utah wins this game, but I don't think it's going to be a complete 38-7 beatdown again. I think the Ducks, they'll come out in the beginning with fiery passion. They'll come out with intensity. But I think Utah picks up the win 31-17. Next, the ACC Championship game, Pittsburgh and Wake Forest. This is going to be an absolute treat to watch, especially if you love offense, because both of these teams are in the top 4 in scoring offense. Pittsburgh averaging 42.8 points per game, Wake Forest averaging 42.9 points per game. And these are top 10 total offenses in college football. And this is a great quarterback matchup. Kenny Pickett, who might slip into the second best quarterback in this upcoming NFL draft class, only behind Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral. 4,066 passing yards this season, 40 touchdowns, which I believe ties him for second with Bryce Young for most in the country, and 7 interceptions. Jordan Addison, however, 4th in college football in receiving yards, 1,353 receiving yards on 85 receptions and 17 touchdowns. For the Demon Deacons, Sam Hartman, 3,711 passing yards this season, 34 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Now, this will be, I think, a game where it's going to be the first to 45 is going to win. I think 45 will be your magic number, and whatever the over-under is for that game, I don't really look at that kind of stuff that much, but whatever it is, just take the over in it. Because I guarantee that it's going to be a game where it's going to be the first team to score 45 points is going to win. And I think that will be Pittsburgh. Because Wake Forest, their big weakness is the run defense. They rank 118th in rushing defense. And I think Pittsburgh, they have got an underrated depth at the running back position. But we don't see it as much because mainly Pittsburgh's offense has been Kenny Pickett to Jordan Addison. But I think we will see the Pittsburgh running game have a huge impact on this matchup. And I think Pittsburgh wins this game. I'm going to say 48-41. Michigan and Iowa in the Big Ten Championship game. For the Wolverines, the task is simple. They control their own destiny, win, and they're in the college football playoff. However, we have seen teams in the past be in Michigan's position and fail to rise to the occasion. Will Michigan rise to the occasion on Saturday night, or will they fail at this mission, causing some chaos leading up to the final college football playoff ranking? But they've got to get past the Iowa Hawkeyes. And when you look at this matchup, you got to think, how can Iowa pull off the upset? Well, it starts with their defense. Can their defense keep Iowa in the game from start to finish? Because I've been saying this multiple times throughout the year. Iowa has really been carried by their defense. I mean, just look at last week against Nebraska. They were down, I want to say it was 21-9 in the fourth quarter. But their defense and special teams got them in that game, and they were the difference maker in that matchup. And Iowa, they are third in the FBS in turnover margin, so their defense will have to force and create turnovers, give Iowa a short field. Because Iowa's offense has been completely anemic all season long, 123rd in total offense. However, they don't get penalized that much. They are fourth in fewest penalties in all of college football. However, in my opinion, they have not faced an offense like Michigan's all season. Michigan has one of the best running back tandems in all of college football with Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum, including Haskins running for 5 touchdowns last week in the upset win over Ohio State. And also, quarterback Cade McNamara has been protected throughout most of the year because Michigan's O-line has only allowed 9 sacks all season long, which is third in the FBS. But I think if Iowa's defense keeps Iowa in the game from start to finish, if they can make this to where you need to have just one offensive drive at the end, because this game, in my opinion, is going to go in one of two ways. It's going to be Michigan winning by an outrageous score of 49-10, or it's going to be like it was a few seasons ago with Michigan State and Iowa, where it was a defensive battle the entire game, and it came down to one offensive drive where Michigan State won on a 22-yard drive that lasted about 8 to 9 minutes to win the Big Ten. And that's how the Spartans got to the playoff that season. I just think that the fact that Iowa has struggled on offense throughout the entire season, despite the defense only giving them an average of 17.25 points per game, Michigan's defense has also been nearly lights out all season long, only giving up an average of 17.17 points per game. So these are 2 top 10 scoring defenses. And I think that it's going to be one of those games where I honestly see Michigan blowing out Iowa here. I just don't think Iowa's going to have the offense to keep up with Michigan in this game. I mean, maybe Michigan picking up that emotional win over Ohio State. Maybe they might come out flat in the beginning of the game, but I think even if they do, Michigan will figure out eventually. I think they should win by at least 14 points. So I'm going to go with the Wolverines, and I think the Wolverines, they will lock up their spot in the college football playoff with a win. Baylor and Oklahoma State in the Big 12 Championship. And these two teams, they faced off in the regular season, and Oklahoma State came out on top 24-14 behind a 125-yard game and 2 touchdowns from Jalen Warren. However, I think that this Baylor Bears team has been much different since that game. Baylor has been running the football well with Abram Smith and quarterback Jerry Bohannon. And I think this game will come down to the same that I said in the regular season. Which team runs the football the best? And I think the game plan is pretty simple for their defenses. Contain the run. Because they contain the run, then they got a good shot to win. If you can run the ball well in this game, you've got a good shot to win. Because Jalen Warren, I think, is one of the most underrated running backs in all of college football. And Baylor, they have ran the football well all year long because they are 8th in the country in rushing offense. However, Oklahoma State, they are 6th in rushing defense, and they are 3rd in total defense. And they only give up an average of 16.5 points per game, which is in the top 5 in all of college football. Baylor, they don't give up many points either, only giving up an average of 19.4 points per game, which is in the top 20 in the FBS. And they also have a top 20 run defense. Oklahoma State's offensive line only giving up 13 sacks all year long, which is 11th in college football. And Baylor's offensive line has been well all year long. I believe they are in the top 20 as far as fewest sacks given up all year long. So this is going to be kind of like the regular season game. Low scoring game. We don't really see the quarterbacks like throw for a lot of yards or even throw the ball as much, because in the regular season game, Bohannon only threw the ball 27 times and Spencer Sanders only threw the ball 23 times. However, Spencer Sanders did throw 3 interceptions in that game, but Jaylen Warren led the Cowboys to victory that night in Stillwater. But I'm going to go with Baylor to pull off the upset. And whoever wins this game is going to have a strong case to the College Football Playoff Committee on why they belong in the College Football Playoff. And I think it's going to be the Baylor Bears. I just think that this Baylor team has been better since their loss to Oklahoma State early on in the year. I forgot to leave my score prediction for Baylor and Oklahoma State. So before I get to the game of the week, I do want to address that. I have Baylor winning 23-21. And finally, the game of the week, perhaps the game of the season, Georgia, Alabama in the SEC Championship game. And what a matchup we are in store for. As we know, Georgia's defense has been dominant all year long, only giving up an average of 230.6 yards per game, the best in the country, and only giving up 6.92 points per game, which is also leading the country. So less than a touchdown a game is what Georgia has been allowing all year long. And Georgia's offense scoring an average of 40.7 points per game. The Georgia offense doesn't get as much recognition, mainly because they are overshadowed by their defense. However, Georgia has yet to face an offense like Alabama. Even though their offense has been struggling a couple of times in these last couple of weeks, it's still Alabama. Alabama is scoring an average of 42.7 points per game, which is 5th in the country. And Alabama's defense, they may not have the scoring defense that Georgia has, but it's still in the top 20 in the country, only giving them an average of 19.92 points per game. And Bryce Young, who might be the Heisman favorite at this point in the year, 3,901 passing yards, 40 touchdown passes, which is tied with Kenny Pickett for second most in the country, and only 4 interceptions. And let's also not forget Alabama. I mean, despite Alabama having some struggles throughout the year, their defense is still 7th in the country in total defense, only giving up an average of 294.2 yards per game. Georgia's offensive line has only given up 8 sacks all year long. However, the leader of Alabama's defense, Will Anderson Jr., leading the country in sacks with 14.5 sacks this season. But the star running back for Alabama, Brian Robinson Jr., a lower body injury. His status for Saturday's game is in question. But even if Brian Robinson Jr. is out for this game, Alabama, they're coached well. They have that next man up mentality. So we're going to see more of Trey Sanders, who is still is still good, just as good as Brian Robinson Jr. So we'll see more of him in that game if Brian Robinson Jr. can't go. Maybe Robinson Jr. will play in this game, but maybe he'll have limited action. So the way I see this game, we know that Alabama, they escaped Jordan-Hare last week in 4 overtimes. The way I see this game, it's going to be a defensive showdown. Even if we see Alabama's offense struggle this week, I have full confidence that their defense will be able to keep the Tide in this game from start to finish. I wouldn't even be surprised if we saw a 9-6 showdown like Alabama and LSU in 2011. But I think there'll be quite a bit more points scored in that game. And knowing Nick Saban, knowing the type of coach Nick Saban is, he is having the Alabama team practicing harder this week, the hardest they have ever been worked. Not only all season, but probably the hardest they've ever have been worked in their entire playing careers. And I think it's going to be a game that comes down to who has the ball last. And I think that's going to be Alabama. I think if it comes down to a drive where the quarterback has to make a play, I am more confident in Bryce Young in this game. Why? Because Bryce Young has practice with that. He did it last week against Auburn. While Stetson Bennett, he hasn't had the experience having to lead a game-winning drive and facing adversity. The main reason for that? Well, because Georgia has been dominating all year long. So let's also not forget that Jamison Williams is going to have a big impact in the Tide's passing game as well, as he got ejected for targeting last week against Auburn. I think Georgia's secondary is going to have their hands full with Jamison Williams because he's averaging over 20 yards per catch. So I think Alabama wins this game by a score of 23-20. I think Bryce Young, he engineers a game-winning drive, and it puts Alabama in the college football playoff. So those are my conference championship weekend predictions. Like, share, and subscribe. And if there was one of the conference championship games I did not predict, that you would like me to predict, leave it in the comments section down below and I will respond to you. As always, have a good day. Until next time.